Welcome to this webinar in the Swedish Language Data Lab project. My name is Vanja Carlén and I'm the project manager of this project from AI Sweden. And many of you have joined us from the start. We started 2 years ago and you have joined our webinars and reference group meetings. And for some of you, this is the first webinar that you are joining. So very welcome. Today we will present the results in the project. You will get to know how to use the results, how to use the models, and how to work with NLP in your organization. So first of all, this is being recorded, so you know. Also, we have a Q&A function, so please ask questions during the session, and our panelists and presenters will be able to answer your questions. So, looking at the agenda for today, I will introduce the project first, and then Recorded Future will tell us more about the language models they have been developing and how to use them, and where to find them as well. And then Talkamatic will tell us more about the dialogue perspective on this. And then SKR, they will tell us how they have been using working with NLP in their organization, and they have really put an effort in taking this project and as an opportunity to start working with language technology. And then Gavagai and Språkbanken will summarize the Nordalida, the language technology conference workshop that they held as part of this project this Monday. So that will be super interesting. And then Jussi from Gavagai will also present the background trained models that he has been developed. And this is very interesting, how you can use and train your model without actually looking at the data. Very interesting when it comes to GDPR as well. And then we have a little break, and then Josephine will our legal coordinator at AI Sweden will go through the legal learnings when we've been trying to share data with open access. And we will publish a white paper next week, so that will be the results presented from that. And then we'll end with a panel discussion where we will talk about sharing data with open access, the future of that, and also the future of accelerating NLP in Sweden. So first, an introduction to the project. The overall goal of the project is to create a national knowledge hub within NLP that will accelerate innovation but also collaboration in this area. And it's a part of Vinnova's funding program, Data Driven Innovation. And we have a big reference group in this project, and it's been a large interest. The core team is consisting of Recorded Future, Talkamatic, and Gavagai, our AI experts in this project, who have been working with the models and working with the data. And then we have Språkbanken, who are the main actor sharing data with open access in Sweden today. And then we have SKR, who, as I said, has really taken this opportunity and working with language technology in their own organization and is the lead owner in this project. And we will go through the results of the project today, pretty much all of them, focusing on models, use cases, and legal learnings. And when we started this project, it was a clear need. We need to access data to train our models on. And as Marcus at Språkbanken said, we need access to open reference data to be able to secure that the models we develop are functional and also respect basic rights. And then we also have a lot of organizations now starting working with NLP and language technology. And Louise Kallenberg, the former director at SKR, said our ambition is to help increase the use of NLP to improve the welfare delivery. And we really want to support organizations starting working with NLP and language technology. And it's also been a very important part of the project to create this knowledge node. And we have collected this knowledge and presentations, NLP blogs at our website where we created this node. So please go in there, and I know that we'll share the link also in our chat. So please do that afterwards, and you'll find a lot of information and about ongoing projects. And I would also like to recommend our NLP webinars that we have every second week. Magnus Sahlgren is organizing that from RISE and AI Sweden, and with relevant topics for researchers and practitioners. So it's on a summer break now, but it will start in the autumn again, and we have it all recorded also, so please look at that. So with that, I will give the word to Recorded Future to describe some more about the language models developed and where we can find them and where we can and how we can use them. So a big welcome.
Thank you, Vanja. I will share my screen here, 1 second. There we go. Yes, hello everyone. I'm Simon, and I'm here with Daniela and Fredrik. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Recorded Futures part in this Swedish Language Data Lab. And our part has heavily been based around developing models for named entity recognition and sentiment analysis in Swedish. And we've also spent some time developing a web app and an API to make these models easily usable. And so the models we develop serve several purposes. Maybe they will fit your needs perfectly, and then that's just great. Just go ahead and use them. In some cases, your use case will be slightly different, so you won't be able to use these models exactly directly on your task. But then we hope that we've proven that this way of working proves that that's an effective process. So you can hopefully learn something from that when you develop your own models in the future. So it kind of boils down to us wanting to both improve or increase the usage of NLP in Swedish, but also to simplify the further development of NLP in Swedish. And also, frankly, we want to use these models in our own product, which we currently do today at Recorded Future. So we're going to go through the models on a quite high level and also show you how you can use them. And then we are going to end off with some future work that can be done in the area. So Daniela, do you want to take the named entity recognition?
Yes. So our first project was named entity recognition. As many of you might know, this is a task that identifies named entities in text automatically and classifies them into predefined categories. In our case, person, location, organization, nationality, religion, and title. And it is a task that is used to extract key information in the text. It's regarded as one of the core tasks in NLP because of the level of insight that you can reach in your analysis through it. And the use cases that we mention here are just some of many, classifying content of text, categorize customer feedback, content recommendation system, and so forth, and so on. Now, very few words regarding the annotation. Why are we saying this? It's because when you use our pre-trained model, you have to be sure that the data it has been trained on has been annotated by following the state-of-the-art procedure for this kind of task. And we have been monitoring the quality of our data throughout the whole process. Also, computational linguists have been included in the process, and we have always monitored internal data agreement and so forth and so on. And as you can see from our results here, categorized by entity type, they're pretty good. It's even hard for human knowledge to beat this or human agreement. So we really think you should give it a try. And would you like to show how it is used?
Yes, of course. As you can see now, this is an example of our small web application for the models that we developed. It is still currently a work in progress, where we try to really, we need still to visualize the NER outputs in a really effective manner, but our idea how to do it is the example. But the core idea is the application being very easy to use. You just select your model, select how you want your results to be presented. You then either upload a file or use the free text input, then just press predict. So in this case, this is our idea on how we want to present the classifications from the NER models. But if you're not interested in the classifications, but instead the raw confidence scores, then we of course have full support for that in both the web app and the API of it. Yes, the next part will be to talk about the sentiment analysis.
Yes, and as you can see here, we have some warning about some explicit language, and we don't really have a lot of examples in the slides, but our annotators certainly had to go through quite a bit of vile language while annotating this, and the reason behind that is that we've kind of steered away from the usual positive and negative sentiments that you usually think of when thinking sentiment analysis, and instead focused on the sentiments of fear and violence. And they're pretty self-explanatory. Fear is someone expressing fear towards something or anxiety towards something, and violence is someone expressing themselves violently towards another person. And along with these models, we've also developed what we call target models that tries to detect what the sentiment is directed towards. So in this example, someone is writing that they're worried about there being a lot of layoffs at Volvo, and in that case the target of the sentiment is that there are going to be layoffs at Volvo. There are some interesting use cases for this as well. One being opinion analysis. Maybe finding out what people in general are worried about today. Another being monitoring inappropriate behavior on forums and social media. And possibly also the police could use these models to detect some escalating threat levels as well. And we're pretty satisfied with the results we've achieved here as well. They're pretty difficult tasks in many ways, but we're pretty happy with having F-scores of above and around 80% for all of these models.
Yes, and how we've incorporated this into our web application is pretty much the same way as the NER models. Same approach, you just select your model, select how you want your results presented, either upload a file as in this example, and then just press predict. And what will happen then is that you will be met with this sort of table where you have all your inputs, your predictions, and your classifications. But as well, we have incorporated so everything is searchable and also sortable, and you are able to search on both keywords and phrases. And we've done this because we feel like this is a good, quick, and like nice approach for you to be able to not only like look at what the models predicts for your data, but actually trying to gain some knowledge and insight from it as well. And now, Danila, would you like to talk about the future a bit?
Yes. So this is, we would like to end by not only presenting the way we are going to use these models personally, but probably also we want to stress how versatile they are and how they can be combined with other levels of analysis in order to get to the results that we or you are after. So for instance, in the case of the target for sentiment analysis, we get a whole clause as the target, and this might be useful or not depending on your use case. So what happens if we apply our named entity recognition on the target labels? Then we would highlight Volvo. the company entity as the target, and these might be actually a way for you to classify the information you're looking for. So please be creative. And thank you very much for listening. Special thanks to Johan Larsson Urkien from our team for helping us out, especially with the sentiment analysis project, and to Staffan Trouvé, of course, for his support throughout the whole project. And here are some links where you can find the raw models on the Record the Future Hugging Face page. The web application and API will come soon. And also, if you want to have a look at our blog post of the Sentiment project, here is the link on Medium.
Yeah, and we can try to post that link in the chat after as well. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for that, Simon, Danila, and Fredrik. We will now continue with a dialogue perspective on these models. So I will hand over to Talkamatic and Jose.
Yeah.
There you are. So welcome.
Yep.
Give the word to you.
Both me and Fredrik Carlén, actually. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. So as Record the Future has detailed about the models, they are indeed valuable and state of the art for the Swedish for the Swedish environment. And, oh yeah, there's Fredrik as well.
I'm back.
Hello.
I just made Chalmers here, so yeah. Yes, I'm gonna find a cozy corner here. Yeah, sorry, I got kicked out when moved into Edu Rome, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, Jose. So I don't know how you introduced us while I was away, but maybe you mentioned our kind of take on NLP, and that we have this use case of dialogue, and that implies spoken language. And a lot of the data that obviously is trained for models is something that is written or like taken from sources, and definitely not so much kind of what has been said out or said between people. So that's our kind of take on the project. So can we use the models that are trained on more kind of textual? So Jose, can you tell us a bit about the differences that we have encountered in our explorations?
So yeah. So since we are a company which focuses on the dialogue perspective to train dialogue applications, dialogue systems, our focus has been on how these models can be used in a dialogue perspective. I mean, for instance, from the perspective of sentiment analysis, the dialogue can be definitely influenced for the sentiment of the person talking to a machine, for instance. Maybe the machine shouldn't be talking very assertively or aggressively to someone that it's experiencing fear or angriness, or yeah. And from an NAR perspective, we do have these differences as well between oral and this spoken spoken dialogues, so to speak, and this written data. And in the data itself, you can find that, there is data that maybe has been extracted from newspapers or whatever, and those are more close to the written data, the written part. But we also have some maybe gray areas, you can say, in which data from social networks or from forums. They are, they are written data, but you wouldn't say they are that literate, that passive, or they are more social. They are more close to the oral data. So this is the kind of data that it's in the model that can be definitely useful for from a dialogue perspective.
And a lot of data like generated in municipalities or in the regions and hospitals, it is an oral data that then is transferred into to text or to written text, like journal keeping, which we have been talking about. So we see a need for being able to recognize entities and also sentiment and other stuff in these kinds of data. And I think one important thing for us, like where we kind of have an advantage since we do develop a dialogue engine, is that traditionally, or like some recorded future, they process data that comes in at one end, and then they have to produce a credible result in the other end of whatever NLP pipeline that they have developed. For us, it's like if we don't recognize a name, we can ask the user, is that a name? Yeah. So we don't have to get the highest confidence scores on any kind of model, just enough so we know that should we ground this, should we like go and ask the user if we understood it's okay or not. So I think that's one advantage that we see that we can make use of, given that we also get these confidence scores, which we didn't get in the beginning of the project when we worked with the entity analysis. One thing that we also think, where we also differ there, is that when you write about the person, because we try to do not only person, but also first name, last name. When you write about the person, you refer to the full name, and then you refer to the last name, like Trump said, Trump said, Trump said. But if you talk to someone, then you say, this is Jose Miguel Cano. Jose Miguel is Jose Miguel. You all use the first name when we talk about someone. So this is like where we wanted to see, is there something, do we need to make more distinction or get more kind of dialogue-like data into the models? And I think that's one finding that we had, that this needs to be investigated further, but also the applicability of like talking to a model, or like using a model to talk to a person about entities and also about sentiment. It's like, är du lite arg nu? And I'm like, no, I'm not. Okay, good, then you're not. So like, it's not about like getting perfect models. It's about getting indications and confidence, or like credibility of like, is something right? And then we can actually have a dialogue around it. Yes. So I don't know, like we I don't know if Daniela and Simon is there, but we had a lot of interesting discussions around how to do annotation.
Fredrik, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we have to go over to our next.
Yeah. Then I'll just promote for that we will have probably one of these seminars later on, where we'll be able to dive more deep into this at another point. So, but thanks for listening to us. And our 5 minutes, I don't know how many those were, but
yeah, it's been a bit more, but yeah.
Sorry about that. Everybody else speak faster after this.
Thank you so much for that, Jose and Fredrik. So we're now moving on to SKR, who have been working with language technology as part of this project, but also took the opportunity to do something and really start working with language technology in your organization, right? So I'll hand over to you, Fredrik at SKR.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. Fredrik Carlén is my name. I've been part of this project almost since the start, or maybe not really, but after at least half a year or something. And what have we been doing in this project? Well, SKR has done, I suppose, several things. We have collected data. We have done a requirements inventory and tried to understand what the municipalities and the regions are what their needs related to this area is. We worked with communication, tried to push out the results from this project in our own networks. We have done external knowledge exchanges, experience exchanges with other parties, and we have also done some internal cooperation between this project and other ongoing stuff internally at SKR, but also in the within the municipalities. But mainly today I would like to speak about, well, also very briefly, because I don't have many minutes, but a proof of concept that we are in the middle of as we speak, which is fueled by this Swedish Language Data Lab, but is actually pursued internally at SKR. And what are we then doing? Well, we are trying to analyze the steering chain. Every municipality in every region, but we're focusing on the municipality side here. They have they set a budget every year, budget or planning documents on the highest political level. And we are interested in what we can derive from the language in this document compared to the actual annual report. So how do these two documents relate language-wise? And our focus is the steering, and therefore we look at the actual targets or the goals that are being set up. So we're interested in identifying, are the goals that are mentioned in the budget documents, are they quantifiable? And are you actually doing some concrete following up? Is there one-to-one mapping of them between these two documents? And to draw it further, how well are these goals actually achieved? Is it possible to sort of score that somehow? Are there analysis done of the goals? Is there, a one-to-one comparison is one thing, but an analysis is another thing. We got these results, why, and what do we do with it? And how would this analysis look? And it's also very interesting to if we could make this work, we could also aggregate this knowledge on a national level or regional level or whatever, and see what differences we can identify. And also we would be interested to see variations in this sort of analysis between different types of goals. For example, digitalization versus sustainability. I'm just as example. So there are so many things we can think of doing with this data, which is openly accessible from the web pages of the municipalities. So it's really great. But we are doing a proof of concept, and one thing that what we have learned along the way is that don't grasp for too much at the same time. Try to really narrow it down. So what we're satisfied with in this first step is what goals are actually followed up by something, some sort of analysis. I think that's the step one for us. And then we hope to be able to dig further into this other stuff and great insights, which could really change the way we work in this area. Because right now there is the capacity is too limited. We need an AI to support us with this. So this is an example of how it might look. So this is the political one of the political goals in the Kungsbacka's budget document in 2019. And you can see for yourself, the goal is an attractive municipality to live and to be in. Then there is some focus areas, and then there is a table. Unfortunately, it's a table because it's hard to derive text from tables. But anyhow, hopefully we can team up with with somebody and to be able to extract from tables in a proper way. Not so easy. But there you can see the quantifiable types of indications that contains very interesting text, basically. And this is how the follow-up of the annual report looks in this particular case in Kungsbacka, connected to that very goal. And you can see they have actually done an analysis, which we think is really good. And they have even quantified on an indicator level. So it's a gold mine for analysis and insight. Not everybody, this is not how all the annual reports look, I should add. So, and that's one of our challenges, I would say. They are very different in form and shape. These documents spread out along the 290 municipalities. But that's our goal, at least. And organization-wise, well, we are doing this project within SKR, as I told you. There's three of us. One comes from the statistical side. One is very knowledgeable about how the steering works. And we also have the sort of data competence in this little team. So we're working with requirements, we're working with annotation. We will, when time is due, also build, we will not build, but we will we will work on building the actual application that we use. And the Language Data Lab is supporting us with the expertise. They're really fueling this project. So without this project, it would have been much harder to get started for us. And another project that is supporting us is this other one, the Swedish Språkmodeller Svenska Myndigheter, which are actually, they have developed, or they are developing, the actual model that we will use for this. It's a BERT model, which they're working with as we speak, and we will continue working with that particular model. And also after this, the language lab is being ended, which is pretty soon. We will keep working with the Språkmodeller Svenska Myndigheter project. Yes, I'm not sure about the time here. Vanja, what do you say? I have a colleague here, Fredrik Rambo from Strängnäs kommun, who would like to share some insights from his project, but I'm not sure he's able to connect. Are you there, Fredrik? No.
It looks like you
Hello,
are.
Fredrik.
Ah, yeah, perfect. So,
Still here?
yeah,
Okay,
please,
hi.
continue.
Would you like to say something about your initiative?
Yes, actually, so hi everyone. I am so I'm Fredrik Rambo, a digital strategist in one of the middle-sized communities in Sweden, and where we're trying, where we're going on with a one AI pilot or proof of concept, and where we have been supported by Fredrik and Simon and others from the previous projects that have been presented, and which we're very grateful for. Our case is coming from the business, so to say. We're a municipality, and we are seeking support to our business, not like we have an AI solution that is looking for the problem that it could solve. So we have a problem that we need to solve with an AI solution. So it's a little bit the other way around. We're looking into young people who are being at risk because of violence or other risks, and how to support them. So we're using this project that Fredrik mentioned in order to see signs of violence or fear. Analysis is going quite well. We're very grateful for the support of you, Fredrik, and data scientists with Simon, among other. And things that we see in the results is that the model is very fine-tuned into looking into text that is talking in the first person, for instance, which for our text, when we're relating to youngsters, is it the third person? So we need to rethink, okay, how should we do the day we develop our own models, which we are doing also in parallel. So actually, when we're making some kind of backward engineering conclusions from the model that we are borrowing from SQR, which is in order to make sure that we land into the results that we want. How should we annotate, for instance? How should we categorize the different entities in annotation and so on? So right now we've been annotating for some time. We are planning into going into some proof of concept during the summer, and hopefully we know more by September. So I don't know, Fredrik, if you think I should highlight some other parts in the project that we are conducting.
I actually have a question. If you would recommend someone else to start, I mean, you have started and you are somewhere on your journey now. What would you recommend them as? What do you wish you would have known when you started?
Yeah, actually, when we started, we had a lot of data, so we thought we'd go for deep learning, some AI, machine learning, deep learning project. So actually, we had no idea. So we thought we'd be like followers and kind of replicate some other people's models. And it turned out that because of the black box effect that deep learning can create, that it's not possible for us in a municipality. The black box, it has, we must how to say, we must be able to explain everything we do based on what. You cannot not say, I've trained this algorithm in that way, so it should be okay. No, you need to kind of go to a more lower level of detail and explain exactly how you made this or that conclusion. So that's one of the learning. So the big learning is get started in a small scale and try and work for system effects. So here we get help from Fredrik, and hopefully we are turning into a model that a proof of concept that some other municipalities can go on and continue within and developing. This discussion we have the SK here. If we can do like this, that's starting as did the epoch proof of concept, and some other municipalities continue after us. Some other learning is that the way we categorize things in life as humans is not at all the way a machine would categorize things. If we're working on, I think in English, it's called a semantic, how to say it, semantic categorization. Like when we're using words, for instance, we're talking again about violence for youngsters, if they are violent or if they are violented, if they are violented at school or at home or something. In our models, our human models of helping youngsters, it's very different. It's very different things that we look at from a very different perspective. For the machine, violence is violence. When you need to annotate hundreds of thousands of sentences in order for the machine to categorize violence at school from violence at home, from being violented to use violence oneself. No, but get help, get started, and help others.
So thank you so much for that. And we're super happy to have you in the project, and it's been really interesting to hear what you at Strängnäs kommun also have done with this. So thank you so much for that. We will have to go move on to the next speakers. So we will now let Peter from Språkbanken and Jussi from Gavagai summarize the Nordalida conference workshop that they had as part of this project this Monday. And I was listening in, and it was super interesting. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So Peter, I hand over to you, and Jussi as well.
Yes, hello. So I'm just going to share my screen. Let's see. So can you see this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we had a workshop this Monday. Nordalida is a biannual language technology conference in the Nordic countries. This year it is in Iceland. It's the last day today, but it's online, of course. So the workshop, it was about different challenges we have in the language technology community. And we divided into 3 sessions: societal, technical, and legal challenges. So, and the overall theme of the workshop was how to, if we build language models, how can we assure that they work as they should? Or how can we, if I want to use the language model, how can I know in what, how it will perform in different contexts and so on? It can be anything from how it will perform, or if you change text type, if it's trained on newspaper text, does it then work on social media? To more serious problems, such as will it be racist, or how does it handle privacy of the people that are mentioned in the model, and so on. So there were 75 participants, and that was about twice as many than we thought, which was nice. We had 4 invited speakers and 4 very short position statements that people could submit. And then the most interesting part was that we had an active open discussion about the different subjects, such as how to cope with minority language and language varieties, such as dialects and so on, technical problems and different solutions for protecting privacy, for example, and legal issues about privacy, intellectual property rights, who is responsible when something happens, and so on. Regarding the last session about legal issues, it was very clear that many people in the language technology community wants guidance. How should we handle these things? Yes, you see?
Right. So there were a number of challenges, and one of them had let's see, the cross-cutting one across all these very various discussions we had was that the challenge can be in some way, and this is my take on it, and not everyone there might agree, but my take on it would be that the major challenge is in general a quality assessment. If you have a language representation and a language model, a language processor, named entity recognizer, a sentiment analysis tool, or a text classifier, whatnot, and it's claimed to be of a certain quality by certain benchmarks or by certain advertising efforts or research reports, how do we know if it fits another purpose? So that is a question in some sense of applicational quality, and the problem is that the quality criteria, of course, vary across where you are. If you're a municipality like the previous speakers were, or if you're a private corporation doing various things, the risk assessments you do when you deploy a tool will be different. In some cases, people will die. In other cases, something might be slightly delayed or or a procurement process might be slightly less unbiased. Some of those things are very drastic and distressing, and some are less so. So the question is how you might test, and these are things that we talk about a lot in the field, of course. How do we test if the language model is appropriate for some task, and how might we test if it's a generally appropriate language model for several tasks? And what sort of sampling procedures can you do to meet these sorts of requirements? And the tricky thing comes when someone in our field thinks that, okay, this thing is done. This is something other people can use. And no engineer of any worth will say no when someone calls up and says, can we use your spiffy black box for our purposes? Everyone will say, yes, absolutely. It's right there. Download it. It's on GitHub, or pay me a load of money and I'll install it in your system, or whatever response you would favor. The question is, how can those people who don't want to apply this tool ensure the quality that they need? What sort of quality audits they need? And this speaks, I added this last fine line there just a minute or so ago, because the previous speaker said something very interesting, Fredrik. You said, we're a municipality, so we need to ensure the quality of what we're doing, and we cannot provide tools that are non-traceable. And this recalls a discussion from the mid-90s where the legal experts around just absolutely refused to use search engines because they were not deterministic. You would never know that a search engine would deliver exactly the same result the second time you run, because they're probabilistic. They're various over time and over the collection changes and so forth. So you could never use them in legal proceedings. Of course, that attitude has faded. Search engines are an acceptable tool even in legal procedures and legal, let's say, legal resolution. But our understanding of how much audit level, how much expertise you need to understand what happened when you input the query string into that black box and you got a bag of documents in return, how much oversight do we need to add to this? So as technology progresses, our requirements to understand that technology changes over time. We don't need to understand exactly how our automobiles work anymore. We don't need to be able to pop the hood and change the spark plugs. This is done by experts now. We trust the expertise there. So there's a very moving target. That's the sort of discussion we need to start properly in the field, including the people who will be using the tools we build. It's not just an internal question about quality. It's a question of what quality can we expect from tools we haven't built ourselves, and who has the responsibility for ensuring that. So just sampling two things that caught hit this in my eye when as we discussed things the day before yesterday, was that we have put some time into discussing data cards, how to label stuff we build, so that we can look at it and say, okay, this is built from data from the 1990s, from news sources. So this is well edited, timely data, but it's 30 years old. Or this is very recent data and it's social media data, but it does not include social media data from Europe. It is only Asian and American continental data. So you know what to expect, what sort of prejudices and biases and what sort of topical stuff there might be there. Those data cards should probably evolve over time because we grow aware of new distinctions after a while. So we might want to be able to annotate them as time goes by. This can contain stuff which is useful for that, but it's not useful for that other thing. And another idea was the differential privacy, which is an algorithmic technique. And I realize the time is up. We will not be able to delve into the details of, but there are ways of addressing privacy issues.
So thank you so much for that, Peter and Jussi. And I would like to have some more minutes to give you on this because it's super interesting. But we have to continue. We were supposed to go through background trained models now, but my suggestion is we take that in the panel instead. I have a slot for you there, Jussi, for that. So we go for a little break now. It's a 5-minute break, and we start at past again. After the break, we will have some legal learnings from the white paper that will be published next week. So we're looking forward to that. But 5 minutes break, so see you past. So it's now time to start again with our legal learnings, and I've invited Josephine here, our legal coordinator from AI Sweden, to present the white paper. And we were really trying hard to share data with open access, and that was quite tricky, but we learned a lot when it comes to the legal part. So and next week we will publish a white paper on these legal learnings. And you will kind of present that white paper today.
Yes, in 10 minutes. So I'm just going to give a short overview, and then hopefully everyone take the opportunity to read the report or the white paper when it's published. So yes, thank you, Vanja. I work as a legal coordinator for AI Sweden, which means that I coordinate legal questions. So I've been part in this project both in relation to, from AI Sweden's side, to discuss the legal questions that we faced, but also taking part of the discussions and trying to find answers. We also work with external lawyers. So there has been a lot of different types of legal questions, both in terms of sharing data, so in relation to the GDPR, when the text data contains personal information, but also in relation to intellectual property rights, such as copyright and things like that. But it has also emphasized questions in relation to how to include the legal aspects into the project process, and also like how to communicate pedagogically together so that everyone understands each other. I heard someone say earlier that there is a need to understand legal questions, but also a need to understand the technical aspects. So through other projects we've been working with in AI Sweden, we've learned that it's often very useful to have the competences from the different sides, both the legal sides and the technical sides, working closely together. And in this case, also the ones who are very have a lot of knowledge within NLP, and also the project process and things like that. So the white paper, you could say, consists of two parts. The first part is we have tried to highlight the questions in relation to use cases. And the data sets we've been trying to use in those use cases, which has highlighted questions in relation to GDPR and copyright. And also we've tried to summarize a few other questions that are in relation to those questions. So that is part 2, you could say. And then part 3 is well, in our perception, some idea of how you can include legal questions into the project process. So just giving some highlights there, or learnings that we've found out from our side, is that when you start the project, it's a very good idea to start with trying to identify potential legal questions that the project could face, and really ensure that the project parties that are engaged are aware of these questions, and trying to insert that into the application, and finding budget and time, and perhaps having a legal work package where the questions can be managed and discussed together. But it's important to include all the project parties into these discussions, because even if there are very technical or specific legal questions concerning perhaps one party, it could be very valuable for all the parties to take part in the discussions and hearing the different sides of the assessments and things like that. And then moving on to actually initiating the project once you've had the budget approved. It's a good idea. From our side, we've learned from also different projects that it's good to have like a workshop starting up with highlighting the questions that we've identified so far, and trying to work together on the questions moving forward when it comes to, for example, sharing data in a project. And there we have also found that it's very valuable to together try to map out what type of data do we need, what purposes do we need it for, who is the owner of the data, and how it has been collected in the first place, and then continuing the assessments in relation to the GDPR. So which project parties needs to take part of the data, and what do we want to do, and how do we want to share the results. And then we've also learned that it's very important to engage legal competence early in the project, and really try to have all the project parties with their competences being part of the assessments, to really understand how the different technologies work in relation to the legislation and things like that, and also to document the assessments. And then after the project, it's great to have these kinds of initiatives trying to share the results. We have the white paper. We have another project where we're soon going to publish a reasoning document also in relation to GDPR and federated learning. So that's a good example of how you can share the learnings from the project in different ways. And also having networks, for example. So if there's a need for or an interest in the NLP community to get support and learn more, then perhaps it would be a good idea to have some kind of additional workshop based on this project and the other project and data labs that has been going continuously during the same time as this project. So those are a few main findings from our perspective, what we believe has been important learnings in the project and how we've tried to manage them. So hopefully the report will be published next week.
Yeah. And you will be able to find it on our language technology site, Knowledge Hub at ai.se, and you have the link also in the chat. So next week.
Yes.
So thank you so much for that, Josephine. Now it's time to move on to the panel. So I will invite Jussi from Gavagai and Staffan from the Recorded Future, and then we have Love also attending from the National Library, and then we should have Peter from Språkbanken as well. Great, so, and Jussi as well. So perfect, so now it's time to discuss some of the learnings and looking a bit forward. We have discussed now the legal questions such as GDPR. We were mentioning copyright and also handling the third-party usage of language models. So taking this into account, at the National Library, Love, you are the main actor in Sweden sharing data and models. How are you solving this? How are you handling this?
Well, so the data at the National Library of Sweden is both very open and easy accessible and very hard to get to. So you can use basically all our digital data on premises. So that's the easy part. But if you want to move it outside of the library, for example, to co-locate data with computational resources, etc., or just use the data in a university setting somewhere else, it's very, very hard. So. And in the long run, I don't think it's acceptable that you have to go to Stockholm to use our data. Our data, even though we don't own it, it's part of the commons, I think, and it should be, you should be able to use it like that. So we're working on various solutions to provide easier access to our data that includes both legal and technical solutions. So we sort of deliberate between what is the legal overhead for this solution and what is the sort of computational technical overhead for the same solution. And then you have to sort of go for where the total overhead for doing something is the smallest. But we're getting there and we're finding more and more ways to do this. And we do it in dialogue with others, including, I mean, governmental agencies and also the EU Commission, who has helped us to sort of think a little bit differently around sharing data. But a lot of the things that we can do now, it's sort of, we can't share data freely, but we can do it in sort of very well-defined projects. We will be able to move temporary copies of our data. So, and another sort of path that we're following is federated learning, where we can have data from still being in the nodes, and then we just share the correlations of the models. So data doesn't really move, but we can still combine KB data with other data.
And Peter, when connecting to this at Språkbanken, you are the main actor sharing data with open access today. How are you solving this technically, and what is your solution on this?
Well, so there are two things we have to think about here. First one is the intellectual property rights. And the second one is privacy issues, and you have to handle them both but we do that in different ways. So for intellectual property rights, it depends on the data we have, but we try to release as much as we can. So for most of our resources, most of our text databases, our corpora, we release them as the text is all there, but the sentences are scrambled randomly, so that you can get all the text, but in every sentence is in a random order, so that then it's not possible to recreate the original. You could see it as just a very large list of citations or something like that, or as a search engine similar to that. But for some data, for example, well, let's say, for example, Twitter, because each tweet is so short, we cannot really try to scramble the sentences in a tweet, because most tweets doesn't have sentences. So then we cannot release the tweets. But we can, for example, calculate frequency distributions and bigrams and different kinds of statistics, n-gram models and so on, and language models that are trained on, and all of those we release for free. When it comes to privacy issues, we haven't come as far as we should yet, but the more sensitive kind of data, like we have data sets with essays written by students, we have data sets with medical journals and medical texts in different kinds, and then to be able to release them, we have to anonymize or pseudonymize them in different ways. So we have a research going on how to do anonymization, and we're not the only one who does this research. It's very hot. Yeah, but all our resources can be accessed from our resources. I can post a link in the chat where you can access them.
And Peter, you're also part of the project Superlim, which is a continuing project on reference data. So yes. Can you really shortly just explain what that is?
Yeah, so the name is because it's the Swedish version of the GLUE benchmark dataset. And the GLUE dataset, it's an acronym which says General Language Understanding Evaluation. And that's an English data set that was released 2 years ago, something like that, 3 years ago, which has become a kind of standard when it comes to semantic evaluation. So in this project, Språkbanken and KB and other actors, we are developing a Swedish evaluation test set. And I can just show, let's see, there it is. So here's this is open for anyone to use. I think it's 12 resources now. Here's about sentiment analysis for immigration, högskoleprovet, ordförståelse, Winograd test, and so on, paraphrases. And it's free for everyone to use. The data sets, most of them are not, they're too small to be able to use as training data, but the main intention that it can be used as test data for testing your own models. Yeah.
Great. We also post information and results on that project on our website as well. But that's super interesting, I think. I'm thinking, you see, when it comes to background trained models and also federated learning anonymization, what is your view on sharing models and data going forward?
Well,
there's a great skittishness on the part of content producers to share the data in fear that someone might, run off with 25-year-old news texts and do something with them, which I think is mostly unfounded. But this can be met easily enough by technological means, by using federated learning, for instance, or other such models as the one we've experimented with in this project, where you train a model offline without ever having access to the data yourself as a human person. You just expose the model to a data set, and then you receive back your model, and you can do whatever you like with the model. Now, this is something that you can use to be tricky with, of course. You might train a model that, well, the simplest possible model is just a copy of all the data, of course. So there needs to be some sort of oversight about what you actually do with the model. But this is a way to ensure that intellectual property rights, as they are today understood, are not transgressed by model training. This is not a way of ensuring perfect individual privacy, because you could train a model that within itself retains individual information, even though it might not be visible on the surface. So this is not a way to train electronic material from electronic health records or such things, but it's a way of laying to rest the worries that someone might actually steal the actual content of the data. And this is something we intend to explore in the future in various ways, because there are very many blockages that are due to intellectual property rights that probably will not be able to circumvent easily. But this was one way of doing so. This approach of letting machines run the text without a human ever laying eyes on them, it seems to be a waste of resource to work on, but this is the way it is right now. I'm revealing some of my opinions about the state of the art and legal activities. These are things that probably will be contested in court at some point, and then things will be more clear. But now there's a great wariness of approaching the frontier of actually getting into a court case about the thing. I think we should push those things into a clear decision at some point. And I think AI.sc might have a role to play there. So please annoy people enough so that we get some court cases that will clarify issues.
Yeah, I can just fill in that we have a parallel project called Federated Learning, where we actually have different work packages, but one work package has focused on legal questions in relation to what type of information the model parameters actually holds when they're moved from a local server to the central server. So that report will also be published quite soon. So if you're interested in reading more about that assessment, then I recommend that you take part of that report as well. So perhaps there we can find a little bit more answers to the questions you raised now, Jussi.
Thank you.
I'm thinking also at the National Library, what do you see, what is your view here, Love, and what do you think about these questions?
No, but I agree with Jussi and the others. I think there's we can see that there are some really absurd interpretations of the integrity sort of GDPR legislation, where there is no sort of risk for individuals having their personal data exposed, and still we sort of are not allowed to do stuff. We need to somehow get past that, and I think one way to do is to have some legal cases. Actually, I think that's the only way, but no one wants to be first because they can be really expensive. So we would rather see someone else doing something that they're not allowed to do. But it is a gray scale. There is no black and white here when it comes to how to interpret how we can use data. We can just see, if we just see to the national libraries in the Nordic countries, which have the same legislation basically, both when it comes to copyright and GDPR, we have at least 4 different interpretations on what's legit and not. So there is a little bit of risk management always, if we should be able to do build models basically.
Okay, so I'm thinking looking at the models then developed, and I'm thinking a little bit, Staffan, now. How can organization listening today use the models, and why should they start with working with language technology if they haven't started yet?
Right. Actually, let me also sort of pitch in on the last question. So, you know, being a company, we've of course done the rational thing. We've asked our American lawyers what we're allowed to do. And it's interesting that essentially we've come to conclusions very similar to what Peter mentioned, that we've also not presenting our customers complete documents, but we are presenting fragments or sentences, if you like. And just as Peter said, if you cannot reconstruct the entire document because it's scrambled or because you just get pieces of it, then the decision or the judgment has been that that's legally fine. Same thing for GDPR. You know, we've asked again legal advice on how to do that, and we have not had many concerns about GDPR issues in our product actually. So to the models, you know, this is sort of a good example of where you have to decide how far you want to stick out your neck, essentially. So, you know, so with the results of the project, you know, where we have both interesting data, raw data, we have annotated data, and we have models. And the conclusion has been that for various reasons, you know, both IP and GDPR, we are not publishing our annotated data freely, unfortunately, I would say. On the other hand, we have made the decision, like I know many others have done, that the models are okay to publish freely. So that's what we've done, you know, so we now have freely available both NER and sentiment models, as you heard in the previous discussion or presentation by my colleagues. And I would just encourage everyone to use it. You know, they are actually quite good. If you look at the performance metrics we have for those models compared to what you have for state-of-the-art English models, for example, there's nothing to be ashamed of. They are quite good. So I would just encourage everyone, you know, first thing I would say is just to use the web interface to try it out. But then, you know, we'd be more than happy both if people downloaded these and started to use them in production. Of course, also if we can get feedback, you know, if people notice that there are some parts which are not working so well, or if we have a lot of false positives or negatives in example one of the entity types, that we'd love to hear feedback on that. So I don't see this as, you know, it's not the final model here. It's really a good first step, but I'm hoping that we can continue to develop this together. I mean, I think this whole project, by the way, has been a great example of the sort of motto of AI Sweden, you know, to develop together and then to share with everyone broadly. So I'm very glad we're able to do that, and at least model sharing has not been prevented by legal hiccups.
Great. One final question to everyone. What did you learn in this project? What do you want to share with this the ones listening today? Both organizations just starting their NLP journey, but also practitioners in this area. Peter, if I start with you, what are your main takeaway from this project?
Well, it's my first project where, in some sense, where we had collaboration with industry, and there was a lot of questions, mainly about legal issues that I really hadn't thought that much about before. So there's been a lot of thoughts and discussions about how to handle legal issues, but still, well, not trying to bypass them, but trying to still work together with.
And Jussi, what about you?
I would concur with Peter there. The previous projects I've been part of have always tried to turn a blind eye to any points of friction. Just pretend they're not there and trust that they will be solved at some point in the future by other people once they become acute. But in this project, we've actually had to address some of them head on, which is quite good. And I think we've noticed that some of them are addressable and with low friction. Some are probably not. And this is why I called for some, you know, let's bring some of these questions to a head, so we actually need to address them. We cannot just pretend that they will solve themselves. Someone will need to solve them, both in the short and long run. And I think that's the main thing I will carry with me from this project.
And Staffan, what about you?
Well, a couple of things. I think, first of all, you know, since we are a US company, our domicile is in the US, so this was interesting for us to do this whole exercise, taking in consideration European law, which we usually don't worry that much about, unless in the case where we have to. I think the other part, this is actually the first time we at Record Future have built our own NER model. Previously, we used off-the-shelf models for that. So we learned a lot in this process, and we worked together not only with the partners here in the Swedish side, but also with Basis Technology, a company in the US. And I think we both learned a lot from them on how to set up annotation guidelines in a good way for that kind of task and how to work with it practically. And I think they actually learned a few things from us as well about how to go about an efficient annotation process. So that was good. But I think that the other thing, you always learn things from just the discussions you have in the project, everything from legal aspects to, discussions with KB and Språkdata and so on about how they are viewing things. So I think we got a broader understanding of how different kind of organizations tackle these, particularly the legal challenges. It's kind of sad thing that, something which you would love to say that this was a technical or scientific challenge, but of course we've spent disproportionately more time than we thought on the legal aspects. But as you said before, we learned a lot in this process.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. And Josephine, just one last comment on the legal learnings. What are your main takeaways?
Well, I think you summarized it great, but I don't think I said it before, but I think a good start is to do a data protection impact assessment. It's a very good tool to make sure that you've highlighted and identified the relevant questions and that you've made your assessment before starting the project and then continuing through the project.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would kind of be my main takeaway.
Great. So time flies, and it's been very nice to have this last seminar in the project. And I thank you all so much for participating in the panel and in the presenters, and also you who have been listening. And as you all understand, this is only the beginning of this. We have the Superlim project. We are planning for an NLP accelerator program this autumn, so for organizations starting their NLP journey, and a lot of initiatives. So please keep yourself updated on our knowledge node at ai.se, and there are so much more to come. So with that, we thank you so much, everyone, for participating today, and see you. Thank you.